In part two of the lecture, I'm going to be talking to you about whether or not we have as much knowledge as we think we have. And in particular, I'm going to be talking to you about the problem of radical skepticism. Now, radical skepticism is the view that we don't know nearly as much as we think we do. And in fact, in its most extreme form, radical skepticism is the view that knowledge is impossible. We don't know anything. We couldn't know anything. Now, radical skeptics often motivate this conclusion by appealing to what is known as skeptical hypotheses. These are scenarios which are indistinguishable from normal life, but where we're radically in error. And what the skeptic says is, look, given that these scenarios are indistinguishable from normal life, you can't possibly say that they don't obtain. You can't possibly rule them out. But insofar as you can't rule them out, well then, you can't possibly know anything about your normal life either, because, of course, for all you know, you could be a victim of the skeptical hypothesis. Now, the example of a skeptical hypothesis that we're going to look at is what's known as the brain in a vat skeptical hypothesis. So it's a bit like the scenario that's depicted in the film The Matrix, if you've seen that film. So the idea is that you think that you're out in the world interacting with people around you, that you're talking to people, walking about in your environment and interacting with your environment, but in fact, none of that is taking place. In fact, your brain has been harvested. It's been taken out of your skull, and it's been put in a vat of nutrients, and it's being fed experiences, fake experiences. So the brain in a vat is floating around there, and it thinks that it's out in the world interacting with other people. It thinks that it's seeing things and doing things, but in fact, nothing of the sort is taking place. So the brain in a vat has radically false beliefs. And yet their experiences are indistinguishable from the experiences we're having right now, which one would hope aren't brain in a vat type experiences. You know, one would hope I really am here and I really am interacting with my environment and I'm not a brain in a vat. So here's the question that the skeptic asks. They say, well, how do you know you're not a brain in a vat? And of course the answer to that is, well, probably we don't. I mean, what could we possibly do to rule out the possibility that we're a brain in a vat? I mean, everything that we experience right now is consistent with us being a brain in a vat. So it wouldn't do, for example, to say, well, look, I can see that I've got hands. Brains in vats don't have hands, so therefore I'm not a brain in a vat. Because, of course, the brain in a vat, when he looks down for his hands, he sees hands too. It's just what he's seeing aren't real hands. They're just the images created by the computers in his experiences. So if we can't rule out this scenario, the skeptic says, well then, how do you know anything about your environment? You know, how can it be that you know you've got hands if you can't rule out the possibility that you're a handless brain in a vat? This is a real puzzle. And it's actually not altogether obvious how we should resolve it. One way to resolve it would be to say that we can know that we're not brains in vats. But then we have to tell some story about how that is the case, given that we can't tell the difference between normal experiences and the experience of being a brain in a vat. Another thing we might want to do is say that even though we don't know we're not a brain in a vat, that is somehow compatible with us being able to know that we've got hands and know that we're standing up, know that I'm interacting in my environment. But that looks rather odd too. I mean, how can it be that I can know that I've got hands, and yet I don't know that I'm not a handless brain in a vat? That seems very odd. So this is a real puzzle. And it prompts a certain kind of feeling of what elsewhere I've called it epistemic vertigo. Is that when you start to reflect on the nature of knowledge, when you start to, as it were, ascend into a reflective mode of thought and start to think about what knowledge is and what is the extent of our knowledge, it ceases to become all that obvious that we really do have as much knowledge as we think we do. And this is the problem of skepticism. So here are our conclusions to part two. We've looked at the problem of radical skepticism, which is the view that we don't know nearly as much about the world around us as we think we do. In fact, that it's the view in its most extreme form that maybe we don't know anything at all. We've seen that radical skepticism makes essential use of radical skeptical hypotheses, which are scenarios which are indistinguishable from normal life, but where we're radically in error. And we've seen that if we are genuinely unable to rule out these skeptical hypotheses, then the skeptic seems to be right in saying that it's not altogether obvious how it is that we can know what we think we know about our environment. That is, the skeptical argument starts to look quite compelling. So the challenge is either to show that we can know the denials of skeptical hypotheses, or else to show that somehow our everyday knowledge is somehow compatible with our failure to be able to rule out these skeptical scenarios. If you'd like to learn more about the theory of knowledge, then I explore these issues in greater detail in my introductory textbook, which is called What is this thing called knowledge? Thank you for listening.